Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. As you can see, I have a bunch of axes lined up along the wood pile here. Today I'm going to be talking about different axe geometries and how they perform differently in wood types, particularly those with straight grain or twisted grain and wood that's dense or soft and spongy. First off, I'm going to be talking about splitting mauls, an axe that is generally 6 pounds or greater and has a hammer face on the back end that is hardened so that you can strike soft metal wedges. Splitting mauls have short bit lengths and are very wide in geometry. Almost always a splitting maul is going to be a wedge, and its design is meant to bust wood apart with very little penetration. This means that it's not very often that you're going to get a splitting maul stuck in the wood. Dense woods, like this white oak, are what I would consider most ideal for splitting mauls. And the reason why is because splitting mauls bust open the wood very quickly due to the wide profile. This means that you're going to get a crack started in the wood faster, and your axe is less likely to get stuck. The splitting maul is really the ideal tool for somebody that's just starting out in cutting firewood. Though it may be more tiresome to use in the long term, a splitting maul is really an overpowered tool that can bust through all types of wood. Additionally, there are less requirements for your skill set, and because of the weight, you can practically just let the tool do the work and drop the head on the wood. Though it can bust through just about anything with enough time, I don't think that the splitting maul is always going to be your best choice. Softer woods that are very fibrous, like this red maple and pines, tend to close up as soon as you form a crack. And that's really the demise of the splitting maul. It succeeds because it forms a crack fast enough, but when these fibers keep pulling together on your maul, you're just not going to get anywhere. And that's where I think a sharper, more narrow-bitted axe is better, because it can penetrate the fibers deep and actually sever what you need to cut. Now here's a subspecies of maul that I wanted to talk about and kind of advise you to stay away from. This particular axe is from Japan. This is an antique splitting axe, and this was likely used for splitting billets, like big long logs, in two. I'm sure you've seen these Husqvarna splitting axes before, and anyone that's used them know that the two major downfalls is that 1, the head comes loose very quickly, and 2, you really compromise the handle when you try to split larger wood because the bit length just really doesn't protect it at all. Not much is known about Japanese tools or Japanese forestry, but I would still assume that this is mainly used for splitting longer logs in two. And I mean no disrespect for this tool, it really is cool. I would just guess that it's not designed for what a lot of people would use it for today. So now I'd like to take time to talk about felling axes and how they can be used for splitting firewood. Here I have 2 axes, one being a True Temper 2.5 pound cruiser double, and the other is a Council Tool Jersey miner's axe on a 26-inch handle. Though axes like these are most likely being used for dropping trees or just to cut up a little bit of firewood at camp, I wanted to prove that this is a very capable tool when you know the right skill, and it really is my most enjoyable tool to use. Using an axe like this requires accuracy, speed, and a knowledge of how to work your way around the wood. Now, I'm sure you're all wondering why I keep hitting this wood at an angle and how is it benefiting me? Well, the technique that I'm employing is called the flick technique. And what this does is I'm preparing to twist the axe head the instant that it strikes the wood, the instant that it forms a crack in the wood. And if you think of this as if you were scooping out the top of the wood with your bit, it's almost as if you're gonna flick it, and that flick is what throws the wood apart, keeping your axe out of the dirt and preventing your bit from getting stuck deep in the wood fibers. The flick technique is most easily mastered by using a light double bit, such as this 2.5 pound cruiser. The reason why a double bit makes it so easy is the balance and the fact that the back weight makes like a lever, forcing the wood apart as you twist. While this technique is very useful in clear-grained wood, you're going to find that you will struggle with wood that has spiral grain. This pine is a great example. Between the knots and the fact that the grain actually spirals as the tree gets bigger, this wood is very difficult to cut with the flick. For that reason, I would suggest that you just try to cut straight through while focusing on power. It's important when cutting wood like this that you have a lot of speed. Without the speed, you're going to get stuck. The bit's going to slow down and you're not going to reach those fibers fast enough. Now I'd like to talk about splitting axes, which are axes that are thicker ground and are typically between 4 and 5 pounds. Unlike a felling axe that has a very narrow bit, both of these axes have more pronounced, flared out, wedge-shaped patterns that aid in splitting. This 4.5 pound Basque splitting axe is quite similar to that of an old Tasmanian pattern. The bit has a lot of surface area that can get sticky in dense woods, but is quite effective in cutting green or more fibrous woods, like maple. On denser woods like this white oak, I would recommend laying the rounds on the side. This allows the bit to get more work done by cutting more fibers per stroke. Believe it or not, this is the more efficient way to cut stuff up on a block, but I still tend to flick my hardwoods on the ground. As you might guess, I really wouldn't be using the axes that I do without the flick technique, and it's pretty cool to know that even a poleless axe can do it with enough practice. It just requires a more aggressive angle. Splitting on a block is just not the most efficient way to cut wood. It dramatically reduces my height, thus cutting down on my power output. Even on softwoods like this pine, you'll see that I cut the wood on its side so that I can sever more fibers per stroke. This is the most efficient way for me to use these axes. Unfortunately, this category of splitting axes is the worst of both worlds when it comes to splitting softwoods like pine. Because they're a little bit thicker ground, the bit doesn't penetrate to reach the fibers that it needs to cut, but at the same time, they're not wide like the Maul, and they don't bust through the knots, so they just end up getting stuck over and over again. So the last thing I want to go over with splitting axes is that they're best used for smaller wood, especially when you're quartering rounds. Now, for you cordwood challengers out there, this should be particularly useful. So if you have any old Tasmanian patterns or any just thicker ground axes in general, you might want to save that and reserve it as your splitting axe for the cordwood challenge. Though it's subtle, there's a lot more metal saved up in the cheeks of this Basque axe opposed to the council tool right beside it. The hollows in the jersey just don't make it pop the wood apart the way that the Basque does. Okay, so we went over the pretty axes. Now it's time to talk about the composite axes. If you want to call this your space axe, go ahead, because it sure looks like it. These axes are made by Husqvarna. This is called their felling model, but it's really more a splitting axe in general. I like this because it's a good chainsaw companion, has a nice hardened pole for pounding wedges, and it honestly doesn't split that bad. I find myself using a composite axe like this more than I do wooden handles that I'd be worried about messing up. Having a couple axes like these would be good for anyone, whether you're just starting out or if you're splitting firewood all day. So this wraps up my discussion on splitting axes. I hope you all found this helpful and enjoyed, and I look forward to speaking with you all in the comments below. See you next time.
Our Mary had a little lamb.